Hey guys, tonight we are going to take a very long walk together. Not the kind of walk where you check your phone every 3 minutes or worry about whether you left the stove on. This is a walk through a city that does not exist anymore. At least, not in the way it once did. You are standing on a cobblestone street, and the stones are warm beneath your feet, even though the sun is beginning to set. The air smells like wood smoke, and something else, something older, something that has been soaking into the limestone walls for 1,000 years. You can feel the weight of the buildings around you, not just the physical weight of stone and mortar, but the weight of everything that has happened here, everything that is still happening, everything that is about to happen and has not happened yet. You breathe in, and the air tastes like dust and crushed herbs and the distant salt of the Mediterranean, carried inland on a breeze that has crossed mountains and deserts and sees to reach this exact spot, this exact moment where you are standing and the empire is dying and nobody quite knows it yet. You walk through the forum, and the marble under your sandals is cracked in places, filled with a thin layer of grit and dried leaves. You notice this because you are paying attention, because this is the kind of detail that most people miss when they are rushing through their days. The columns that line the square are still tall, still white, still impressive. But if you look closely, you can see the patchwork repairs. The newer stone fitted awkwardly against the older. The patches of discoloration where water has seeped in and left its mark. A dog trots past you, ribs visible beneath its fur, tail moving in a slow rhythm that suggests it has somewhere to be, but no particular urgency about getting there. You hear a cartwheel squeaking somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic creak of wood on wood, and beneath it, the low murmur of voices, merchants closing up their stalls, workers heading home, children being called in by parents, whose voices carry across the open square with that particular quality of sound that only exists in places with high walls and hard surfaces. You stop at a fountain because you are thirsty, and the water running from the bronze spout is cool and clear. You cup your hands and drink, and the water tastes like minerals and cold stone. There are coins at the bottom of the basin, tossed there by people making wishes, or just getting rid of their last copper pieces. You think about the irony of throwing money into water when money is becoming harder and harder to come by, when the coins in your pocket are worth less than they were last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, in a slow, steady decline that most people have stopped noticing, because it has been happening for so long that it feels like the natural order of things. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and keep walking. The streets narrow as you move away from the forum, and the buildings press closer together. You can reach out and touch the wall of a baker's shop, and the plaster is rough and warm, baked by the sun all day. Through the open doorway, you can smell bread, real bread, not the kind you get in packages, the kind that has been made by hand with flour and water and salt and left to rise. And and then baked in an oven hot enough to make the air around it shimmer. The baker is pulling loaves from the oven with a long wooden paddle, and the bread is golden and crackling, and you can see the steam rising from it in the late afternoon light. You want to buy a loaf, but you check your coins first, and you do the math, and you decide that bread is a luxury you can afford today, but might not be able to afford tomorrow. So you keep walking, and the smell of bread follows you for a block, and then fades into the general background noise of the city's atmosphere. You pass a soldier leaning against a wall, and he is wearing armor that has seen better days. The metal is dull, not from neglect, but from use, from being polished and scratched and polished again until it has thinned in places. His helmet has a dent on the left side, and you wonder what happened to cause that dent, whether it was a falling object or a weapon, or just an accident during training. He is eating something from a cloth bundle, chewing slowly, watching the street with eyes that have learned to look at everything and react to nothing. You nod at him as you pass, and he nods back, and there is a brief moment of connection between two people who are both just trying to get through the day in a city that is slowly, almost imperceptibly, coming apart at the edges. You turn a corner, and the street opens into a small square surrounded by apartment buildings. The buildings are tall, 5 or 6 stories, made of brick and concrete and wood, and you can see laundry hanging from the upper windows, tunics and cloths and sheets flapping in the breeze like flags of a nation that nobody has officially declared independence from, but is quietly separating itself from anyway. A woman on a balcony is beating dust out of a rug, and the dust catches the light and turns gold for a moment before settling back down onto the street. Below her, a group of children are playing a game with a ball made of stuffed cloth, and their laughter echoes off the walls in a way that makes you smile despite yourself. Because children are always children regardless of what century it is, or what empire they are living in, or whether that empire is flourishing or falling. You keep walking, and the further you go from the center of the city, the more the decay becomes visible. Not the kind of decay that makes headlines or causes panic, but the slow, steady erosion of infrastructure that happens when there is not enough money to maintain everything, and too many things that need maintaining. A section of road has sunk an inch or two, creating a shallow puddle that reflects the sky. A wall has a crack running from top to bottom, and somebody has tried to fill it with mortar, but the mortar has already started to crumble. A public building has scaffolding against one side, but there are no workers on the scaffolding, and the wood is weathered and gray, and you get the sense that the scaffolding has been there for months, maybe years. A framework of a repair that was started and never finished because the funds ran out, or the workers were sent somewhere else, or the officials in charge simply forgot about it. You find a bench, or what passes for a bench in this part of the city, a long stone slab that has been polished smooth by generations of people sitting on it. You sit down, and the stone is warm but not hot, and it feels solid beneath you. The kind of solid that comes from something that was built to last and has mostly succeeded. You watch the street for a while. A merchant pushes a cart loaded with clay jars, and the jars clink together with each bump in the road. A group of men in dark cloaks hurry past, their faces hidden, their purpose unclear. A cat sits on a windowsill and watches everything with the detached curiosity that only cats possess. You breathe in and you breathe out, and you think about how strange it is to be sitting here in a city that will one day be a memory, a story that people tell each other in the dark, a collection of ruins that future generations will visit and try to understand. The sun is lower now, and the light has that particular quality that only exists at dusk, a golden-orange glow that makes everything look richer and more detailed than it actually is. The shadows are long and soft, and they stretch across the street like fingers reaching for something they cannot quite grasp. You feel a breeze on your face, and it carries the sound of music from somewhere nearby. A flute maybe, or a lyre, played badly but with enthusiasm, and you find yourself tapping your fingers against your knee in time with the rhythm, even though you cannot quite make out the melody. You stand up and keep walking, because standing still for too long in a place like this makes you think about things that you might not want to think about. Things like the weight of history and the fragility of civilization, and the fact that everything built by human hands eventually returns to the earth that it came from. You walk past a bathhouse, and you can hear the sound of water and voices inside, the echo of people talking and laughing and splashing in rooms where the walls are lined with tiles, and the floors are heated from below by a system of pipes and furnaces that took enormous effort and expense to build and maintain. You wonder how many people inside the bathhouse realize that the hot water they are enjoying is part of an infrastructure that is slowly falling apart, that the engineers who designed this system are dying and not being replaced, that the copper pipes are being stolen and sold for scrap, that the furnaces require fuel that is becoming more expensive every year. You wonder if any of them think about these things, or if they just soak in the warm water and try not to think about anything at all. The streets are getting darker now, and the oil lamps are being lit one by one, small pools of amber light in the growing darkness. You can smell the oil warming, a thick, rich scent that mixes with the other smells of the city, the food cooking, the animals, the dust, the human sweat and perfume, and whatever else people carry on their bodies as they move through their days. You pass a tavern, and the sound of conversation and clinking glasses spills out into the street. You can see figures moving inside, silhouettes against the warm light, and you hear a burst of laughter that rises above the general noise and then fades back into it. You think about going in, about sitting down with a cup of wine and listening to people talk about the things they talk about when they are relaxed and a little drunk. The prices of grain, the rumors about the army, the latest edict from the capital, the neighbor whose son went off to join a mercenary band and has not been heard from since. But you keep walking because you have further to go, because there is more to see, because the night is young and the city has stories to tell if you are willing to listen. You find yourself near the city walls, and you can feel the difference in the air here. The way the space opens up, and the sky becomes visible above you instead of being cut into strips by the buildings on either side. The walls are enormous, built of massive blocks of stone fitted together with a precision that modern engineers would still find impressive. You run your hand along the surface, and the stone is cool and slightly rough, and you can feel the individual grains of sand that were mixed into the mortar centuries ago. You look up, and the wall rises high above you, topped with a walkway where guards patrol at regular intervals. You can see their silhouettes against the darkening sky, moving slowly, pausing to look out over the countryside, their spears catching the last light of the day. Beyond the wall, you can see the fields, dark and flat, and stretching out into the distance. There are no lights out there, or very few, just the occasional flicker of a fire or a lamp in a farmhouse. The countryside is quiet in a way that the city never is, and you can hear the sounds of the night, insects calling to each other, an owl somewhere in the trees, the wind moving through the grass. You think about the farms out there, the ones that supply the city with food, the ones that have been worked by the same families for generations, the ones that are struggling because the taxes keep rising, and the labor keeps shrinking, and the weather keeps being unreliable. You think about the farmers who wake up before dawn and work until the sun goes down, who send a portion of their harvest to the city and keep just enough for themselves, who watch the roads for signs of raiders and hope that this year the raiders will go somewhere else. You turn away from the wall and walk back toward the center of the city, and the streets are quieter now, the lamps dimming low, the sounds of the day replaced by the sounds of the night. A guard passes you, his armor clinking softly, his footsteps muffled by the dust on the street. He glances at you, but does not stop, and you glance back, and there is a moment of mutual recognition. Two people awake at the same time in a city that is mostly asleep, both of them carrying the unspoken knowledge that things are changing, that the world they knew is not the world their children will inherit, that the slow unraveling of everything is happening not with a bang, but with a long, drawn-out sigh. You reach a crossroads and stand there for a moment, listening to the city breathe. It sounds like breathing, actually, a slow, rhythmic pattern of sounds that rises and falls. The distant bark of a dog, the creak of a door closing, the murmur of a voice from an open window, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. This symphony of ordinary life playing out in a city that is holding on with both hands, gripping the edges of what it was, and refusing to let go even as the ground beneath it slowly shifts. You open your eyes and choose a direction, any direction, and start walking again. The night is deepening, and the stars are coming out, and you can see them between the buildings. Small points of light that have been shining for longer than anyone can imagine, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires, and the ambitions of men, and the slow erosion of stone and mortar, and everything else that humans build in the desperate hope of leaving something behind that will outlast them. You walk under those stars, and they walk with you, and the city stretches out around you, alive and dying, and stubbornly refusing to choose one or the other. And you keep moving because that is what you do. That is what everyone does, one step at a time, through the warm night air, through the smell of wood smoke and dust and distant rain, through the city that was once the center of the world and is now something else, something quieter, something smaller, something that is learning how to let go. You are walking now through a different part of the city, a neighborhood where the streets are wider and the buildings are set further apart. You can tell this was once a wealthy area because the buildings still have traces of their former grandeur. The columns are carved with intricate patterns, vines and flowers, and geometric designs that have been worn smooth by time and weather. The doorways are tall and arched, and some of them still have the original wooden doors, thick and heavy, and studded with iron nails, but you can also see the signs of decline. The marble steps are worn down in the center, where thousands of feet have passed over them. The painted walls are faded, the colors bleached by the sun and washed by the rain. The gardens that once surrounded these buildings are overgrown, the fountains dry, the stone benches covered in moss and lichen. You step into one of these gardens because the gate is open, and the path beneath your feet is covered in a layer of fallen leaves and small stones. The garden is a tangle of vegetation, vines climbing up the walls, bushes growing wild and untamed, trees reaching up toward the sky with branches that have not been pruned in years. You can smell the earth, rich and damp, and the sweet scent of flowers that are blooming without anyone to tend them. A bird calls from somewhere in the trees, and you hear the rustle of wings as it moves from branch to branch. You find a bench that is still mostly intact and sit down, and you watch a lizard scurry across the path and disappear into a crack in the wall. You think about the people who lived here, the people who built this garden and maintained it and enjoyed it, who walked these paths and sat on this bench and listened to the same birds that are singing now. You think about what they must have felt, sitting in this garden at the height of the empire's power, when the city was at its most prosperous, and the streets were filled with merchants from every corner of the known world, and the harbor was packed with ships bringing goods from Egypt and Gaul and Spain and beyond. You think about how different their lives were from the lives of the people living here now, how much has changed and how much has stayed the same, because the birds still sing and the flowers still bloom and the earth still smells like earth, regardless of who is paying taxes and who is in charge, and what the borders look like on a map. You stand up and continue your walk, and the further you go, the more the character of the neighborhood changes. The grand buildings give way to smaller houses, the kind of houses that were built for middle-class families, shopkeepers and artisans, and minor officials. These buildings are in various states of repair. Some have been well maintained, the plaster fresh, the roofs intact, the windows glazed with glass that catches the moonlight. Others are clearly struggling, the walls cracking, the roofs sagging, the doors hanging off their hinges. You pass a house where the front wall has been partially demolished, and through the opening you can see the interior, rooms stripped of their furnishings, the floor covered in debris. A single chair sitting in the middle of what was once a dining room. You wonder what happened here, whether the owners moved away or were forced out, whether the building was abandoned or simply fell victim to the slow attrition of neglect and poverty. You hear a sound behind you, a soft scraping noise, and you turn to see a man dragging a cart loaded with salvaged materials. He is pulling the cart with a rope over his shoulder, and his back is bent with the effort. The cart is piled with tiles and pieces of marble and chunks of brick, all of it clearly salvaged from abandoned or demolished buildings. He passes you without looking up, his focus entirely on the weight of his load and the uneven surface of the street. You watch him go, and you think about the industry of recycling that has grown up in this city, the way people are dismantling the old to survive in the present, how the grand monuments of the past are being reduced to raw materials for the construction of the present, how the marble that once lined the walls of temples and government buildings is now being used to patch up the roofs of ordinary houses. The street curves, and you find yourself looking at a building that is clearly still in use. Light is coming from the windows, and you can hear the sound of voices inside, a group of people talking, their words indistinct, but their tone suggesting a casual conversation, the kind of conversation that happens when people gather in the evening to eat and drink and pass the time. You can smell food cooking, something with garlic and herbs, and your stomach makes a small, involuntary sound that you hope nobody heard. You keep walking because you are not invited, because this is not your place, because there is still more of the city to see and more stories to absorb. You reach a marketplace, and it is empty now. The stalls closed, the awnings pulled down, the ground littered with the debris of the day's commerce. Leaves, stray pieces of produce, bits of paper and cloth, the detritus of 1,000 transactions. You walk through the market, and your footsteps echo on the stone pavement. You can see the ghost impressions of where the stalls used to be, the outlines of tables and crates and display racks, the patterns worn into the ground by the feet of merchants and customers who come here every day to buy and sell and haggle and gossip. You think about the economy of this city, the way it has changed over the years, how the great, trade networks that once connected Rome to every corner of the empire are slowly contracting. How the ships that used to come to the harbor every day are coming less frequently now. How the goods that used to be cheap and abundant are becoming expensive and rare. You remember, or perhaps you have heard, that the price of bread has tripled in the last decade. You remember that the coins people use are made of less and less silver, that the government has been debasing the currency for years, mixing copper and lead into coins that are supposed to be silver, and that nobody trusts the money anymore, that people hoard the old coins and refuse the new ones, that barter is becoming more common than commerce. You think about the taxes, how they keep rising, how the government needs more and more money to pay for the army and the bureaucracy and the public works that are falling into disrepair, how the tax collectors are hated and feared, how the people who cannot pay are forced to sell their land or their freedom or their children. You think about the inflation, the way prices rise and wages stay the same or fall, the way the gap between rich and poor grows wider every year, the way the middle class shrinks and disappears, leaving only the very wealthy and the very poor, and almost nothing in between. You walk out of the marketplace and find yourself on a street that slopes downward, and you can smell the river before you see it, the distinctive scent of water and mud and vegetation, and whatever else people throw into it. The Tiber is wide and slow, and the moon is reflecting off its surface in a shimmering path of silver. You walk along the riverbank, and the ground is soft and damp beneath your feet. There are boats moored along the edge, small fishing boats and larger cargo vessels, their ropes creaking as they bob in the current. A fisherman is sitting in one of the boats, mending a net, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who has been doing this for decades. He does not look up as you pass, and you do not interrupt him, and the two of you share a moment of quiet coexistence, strangers in the same place at the same time, both of them awake while the rest of the city sleeps. You look across the river, and you can see the lights of the warehouses on the other side, the great storage buildings where grain and olive oil and wine and other goods are kept before being distributed to the city. You know that the warehouses are not as full as they once were, that the supply lines are stretched thin, that the provinces that used to send grain to Rome are having trouble producing enough for themselves, let alone for the capital. You know that the government has been struggling to maintain the annona, the grain dole that has fed the city's population for centuries, that the amount of grain being distributed has been decreasing, that the people who depend on it are going hungrier every year. You know that there are rumors of shortages, of empty markets, of families rationing their food and making do with less and less. You know all of this, and yet standing here in the moonlight with the river flowing quietly beside you, it all feels distant, abstract, like something happening to other people in other places. You keep walking along the river, and you pass under a bridge, and the darkness beneath it is cool and damp. The sound of the water is louder here, amplified by the stone arches, and you can hear the water lapping against the supports, a gentle rhythmic sound that is almost soothing. You think about the engineering that went into building this bridge, the precision and skill required to construct something that spans a river and carries the weight of thousands of people and carts and animals every day. You think about the engineers who designed it, the workers who built it, the generations of people who have crossed it, and you wonder how many of them thought about the bridge as a symbol of permanence, a structure that would outlast them and their children and their children's children. You wonder if any of them imagined a time when the bridge would still be standing, but the empire that built it would be gone. You emerge from under the bridge and find yourself in a neighborhood that feels different from the others you have walked through. The buildings are lower here, simpler, and the streets are unpaved, just packed dirt that turns to mud when it rains. This is where the laborers live, the people who work in the warehouses and the workshops and the fields, the people who keep the city running without ever appearing in the history books. You can hear them before you see them, the sounds of snoring and coughing and restless movement coming from behind the thin walls of their dwellings. A dog barks, sharp and sudden, and then settles back into silence. A baby cries somewhere, a thin wailing sound that rises and falls and eventually fades away. You walk quietly through this neighborhood, careful not to disturb the people who are sleeping, aware that you are a stranger in a place where strangers are not common. You see a light in one of the windows, a small flickering flame, and you pause to look inside. An old woman is sitting at a table, her hands busy with some kind of craft, weaving or mending, or whatever it is that old women do when they cannot sleep. Her face is lined and weathered, and her hair is gray and pulled back in a simple knot. She is humming to herself, a low, tuneless sound that seems to be more habit than intention. You watch her for a moment, and she looks up and sees you, and for a second your eyes meet, and then she looks back down at her work, and you keep walking. You do not know who she is or what her story is, but for a moment you felt a connection, a brief acknowledgement of shared humanity between two people who are both awake in the middle of the night in a city that is slowly falling apart. You reach the edge of this neighborhood and find yourself looking at a wall, a high wall topped with spikes. And beyond the wall, you can see the dark shape of a large building. You recognize it as a granary, one of the many that dot the city, and you wonder about the security around it, the guards who patrol the perimeter, the locks on the doors, the measures taken to protect the food supply from theft and sabotage. You think about the tension between the need to protect resources and the reality that there are not enough resources to go around. How the people inside the walls have enough to eat while the people outside do not. How this inequality breeds resentment and unrest. How the government tries to maintain order with a combination of force and charity, but is failing at both. You turn away from the wall and walk back toward the center of the city, retracing your steps in a different direction. The night is deep now, the kind of deep that only comes in the hours before dawn, when the world is at its darkest and most quiet. You walk through streets that are mostly empty, past buildings that are dark and silent, under the watchful gaze of the stars that continue to shine regardless of what is happening on the ground below. You feel tired, the kind of tired that comes from walking and thinking and absorbing, and you find yourself moving more slowly, your steps heavier, your mind less sharp. You are still walking, but you are also drifting, your thoughts becoming less organized, your attention less focused, your body moving on its own while your mind wanders through the landscape of your own thoughts. You pass a building that catches your attention, a large structure with columns and a pediment, clearly a public building of some kind. The doors are closed, but the windows are open, and you can see inside. The building is empty, stripped of its furnishings, the walls bare, the floor covered in dust. You can see where paintings used to rest, the lighter patches of wall where the frames once were. You can see where statues used to stand, the circular marks on the floor where the bases were bolted. You can see where benches and tables and desks used to be, the ghost outlines of a space that was once filled with activity and is now just an empty shell. You wonder what this building was: a government office, a courthouse, a meeting hall, and you wonder what happened to it, why it was abandoned, whether the people who worked here were relocated or dismissed or simply stopped coming because there was no work to do and no pay to receive. You push open the door and step inside because curiosity is a powerful force and you are too tired to resist it. The interior is cool and still, the air thick with dust that rises in small clouds with each step you take. You can hear your own breathing, loud in the silence, and the soft scuff of your sandals on the stone floor. You walk to the center of the room and look around, and you can see the traces of the building's former life, the hooks on the walls where documents were hung, the grooves in the floor where furniture was dragged back and forth, the faint stains on the walls where candles flickered for years and years. You think about the people who worked here, the clerks and scribes and officials who sat at their desks and processed paperwork and made decisions that affected the lives of thousands of people. You think about the documents they handled, the tax records and legal judgments and military orders and administrative directives, all of it written on parchment and papyrus and stored in cabinets and archives, all of it representing the machinery of government that once ran the largest empire the world had ever seen. You wonder where all those documents are now, whether they were moved to another building or fallen, or simply left to rot, whether the records of this empire's existence will survive long enough to be read by future generations, or whether they will dissolve into dust and be forgotten. You think about the irony of it all, how the empire that prided itself on its records and its bureaucracy and its administrative efficiency is now losing the ability to maintain even the most basic systems of governance. How the paperwork that once held everything together is now just so much paper. How the people who once wielded power through the pen are now just people, trying to survive in a world that is changing faster than they can understand. You leave the building and close the door behind you, and you keep walking. The sky is beginning to lighten, just slightly. A faint gray glow on the eastern horizon that suggests dawn is still a few hours away. The air is cooler now, and you can feel the moisture in it, the promise of morning dew. The streets are still quiet, but you can hear the first sounds of the day beginning. A rooster crowing somewhere in the distance, a door opening and closing, the creak of a cartwheel. You walk through these sounds, through this half-awake city, and you feel a sense of calm that you did not expect. A peacefulness that comes from simply being present in this moment, from accepting that the empire is falling and that you are here to witness it, from letting go of the need to understand everything and simply experiencing what is. You find a small garden, a walled enclosure behind a row of houses, and you slip through an open gate and sit down on a stone bench. The garden is small and simple, a few fruit trees and some herbs and a patch of vegetables, clearly tended by someone who uses it to supplement their food supply. The trees are heavy with fruit, and you can smell the sweetness of ripening figs in the air. A small stream of water runs through the garden, channeled from a public fountain through a narrow channel in the ground, and you can hear it bubbling softly as it flows. You close your eyes and listen to the water, and you let yourself drift, your thoughts becoming less focused, your body relaxing, your breathing slowing down. The city is still sleeping, but it will not sleep for much longer. Soon the streets will fill with people going about their daily business. The markets will open. The workshops will start up. The government offices will fill with clerks and petitioners, and anyone else who needs something from the machinery of state. The sun will rise, and the day will begin, and the slow unraveling of the empire will continue, one small event at a time, one small decision, one small failure, one small act of survival. But for now, in this quiet hour before dawn, the city is still, and you are still, and the only sounds are the water flowing through the garden, and the distant call of a bird, and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. You let yourself sink deeper into this moment, into this feeling of stillness and peace. The empire is falling, yes, but you are here, and you are breathing, and you are alive. And there is a kind of beauty in that, a kind of meaning that does not depend on borders or governments or armies or currencies. There is just this, the present moment, the warmth of the stone beneath you, the coolness of the morning air, the sweetness of the figs on the trees, the sound of water flowing through a small garden in a city that was once the center of the world and is now just a place where people live and die and try to make sense of it all. You breathe in and you breathe out, and you let the darkness and the quiet wrap around you like a blanket, warm and heavy and comforting. And you feel yourself drifting into the space between waking and sleeping, where nothing matters except the rhythm of your own breath and the gentle sound of water and the slow fading of the last stars in the morning sky. You wake, or rather you become aware again, and you are standing in a different part of the city. You do not remember walking here, but your feet brought you, and here you are, in a neighborhood where the buildings are newer, and the streets are wider, and the atmosphere is different, lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of centuries. This is a neighborhood that was built more recently, in the last few decades of the empire, and you can tell by the construction, the way the buildings are designed, the layout of the streets, the presence of newer infrastructure that has not yet had time to decay. But you can also see the signs of struggle. The way the buildings are smaller than they were intended to be. The way the streets are not fully paved. The way the public spaces are underdeveloped. As if the resources ran out before the plans could be completed. You walk down the main street and you pass a row of shops that are clearly struggling. One has a sign that has been taken down, the hooks still visible on the wall where it used to rest. Another has its windows boarded up, and you can see through the gaps that the interior is empty. A third is still open, but the shelves are sparse, the goods on display few and unimpressive. The shopkeeper sits behind a counter, his head resting on his hand, his eyes half closed, waiting for customers who may not come. You look at the goods on display, and you can see the effects of the broken trade networks. The olive oil is local, not imported from Spain. The cloth is coarse and rough, not the fine textiles that used to come from the East. The metalwork is simple and utilitarian, not the ornate pieces that used to be crafted by skilled artisans who had access to the best materials and the best training. Everything here is a shadow of what it once was, a diminished version of a former abundance. You keep walking, and you find yourself near a military garrison. You can see the soldiers drilling in a courtyard, their movements precise and practiced, their weapons gleaming in the morning light. They are young, most of them, and they look determined, and you feel a pang of sympathy for them, because they are striving for something that is already gone, something that exists only in their imaginations and in the stories they have been told about the greatness of Rome. You watch them for a while, and you notice details that suggest this is not the army it once was. The uniforms are mismatched, some soldiers wearing one style of armor and others wearing something different. The weapons are a mix of old and new, some clearly salvaged from older stockpiles. The officers are shouting orders, but the soldiers are responding in different languages, a mix of Latin and Germanic dialects, and something else you cannot identify. You think about the composition of the army, how it has changed over the years, how fewer and fewer citizens are willing or able to serve. How the government has been forced to recruit from outside the empire, from the very peoples it is supposed to be defending against. You walk past the garrison and find yourself on a street that leads to one of the city's gates. The gate is open, and you can see the road stretching out beyond it, a straight ribbon of packed earth and stone that leads into the countryside. There are people on the road, travelers and merchants, and soldiers and refugees, moving in both directions, some arriving and some departing. You watch them for a while, and you notice the variety of their dress, the different styles of clothing and armor and equipment that suggest they come from many different places. You hear a mix of languages, Latin and Germanic and Celtic, and something you cannot place. And you realize that this city, this great city that was once the center of a vast empire, is now a crossroads, a place where different peoples and cultures mix and interact, and sometimes clash. You think about the migrations, the great movements of peoples that have been reshaping the landscape of the empire for decades. The Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals, and the Franks, and the Alemanni, and all the others, each group pushing against the borders, each group looking for land and resources and security, each group contributing to the slow transformation of the empire into something new, something different, something that the people who built it would barely recognize. You watch a group of travelers pass through the gate, a family with a cart loaded with their belongings, and you can see the weariness in their faces, the dirt and exhaustion of a long journey. They are moving slowly, the cart wheels groaning under the weight, the oxen plodding forward with their heads down. The children are walking beside the cart, their small legs carrying them along with the determination of children who have learned that they must keep up or be left behind. The parents are scanning the road ahead, looking for signs of danger, for bandits or hostile groups, or whatever other threats exist on the roads of a crumbling empire. You feel a deep sense of empathy for them, for all the people who are on the move, who have been displaced from their homes and are searching for a new place to settle, a new community to join, a new life to build. You think about the historical forces that have set them in motion, the pressure from the east, the climate changes, the conflicts between different groups, the economic collapse that has made it impossible to sustain communities in their traditional homelands. You think about how these migrations are not just a political or military phenomenon, but a human one, a story of ordinary people trying to survive in extraordinary circumstances. You turn away from the gate and walk back into the city, and you find yourself in a part of town that is filled with workshops and factories. You can hear the sounds of industry, the clanging of metal, the scraping of wood, the rhythmic thumping of looms. The streets here are busy, with workers carrying materials and finished goods, with carts being loaded and unloaded, with the constant movement of commerce and production. But even here, you can see the effects of decline. The workshops are smaller than they used to be, the number of workers reduced, the volume of production diminished. You can see empty spaces where factories used to operate, the buildings still standing, but the equipment removed, the doors locked, the windows broken. You think about the economic collapse, the way the demand for goods has decreased, the way the supply chains have broken down, the way the skilled workers have died or moved away, or simply stopped practicing their trades because there is no market for their products. You stop outside a workshop where a blacksmith is at work, and you watch him through the open doorway. He is older, his face lined and scarred from years of working with fire and metal, his arms thick with muscle that has been built and maintained through decades of physical labor. He is shaping a piece of iron on his anvil, hammering it with rhythmic precision, the sparks flying with each strike. You can feel the heat from the forge, and you can smell the smoke and the hot metal and the sweat. You watch his hands, and you see the skill in them, the years of practice that have turned this work into an art form. You think about the knowledge that resides in this man's hands, the techniques that have been passed down through generations, the understanding of metal and fire and force that cannot be taught from a book, but must be learned through experience. You wonder who will learn this craft after he is gone, whether there are young people willing to spend years apprenticing to master a trade that may not have much of a future, whether the knowledge he carries will survive or die with him. You keep walking, and you find yourself near a public building that is clearly still in use. There are people coming and going, and you can hear the sound of voices from inside, the murmur of conversation, and the occasional raised voice of someone making a point. You step inside because the doors are open, and you find yourself in what appears to be a meeting hall or a council chamber. There are people seated in rows of wooden benches, and at the front of the room, a man is speaking, his voice carrying to the back of the room with the practiced projection of someone who has done this many times before. He is talking about taxes, about the need to raise more revenue, about the shortfall in the city's budget, about the services that are being cut and the ones that are being maintained. The audience is listening with varying degrees of attention, some nodding in agreement, some looking skeptical, some simply waiting for the meeting to end. You find a seat near the back and listen, and you can hear the details of the city's financial situation, the way the revenue from taxes is not enough to cover the expenses, the way the government is borrowing money and debasing the currency and selling off public assets to stay afloat. You hear about the cuts to public services, the reduced maintenance of roads and bridges and aqueducts, the lower pay for soldiers and officials, the reduced distribution of grain and oil and other essentials. You hear about the corruption, the way money is being siphoned off by officials who are supposed to be managing the public treasury, the way bribes are being demanded and paid, the way the system has become so broken that even the people who are trying to fix it are part of the problem. You listen to all of this, and you feel a sense of weary familiarity, because these are the same problems that have been discussed in rooms like this for years, decades, centuries. The same cycle of decline and attempted reform and further decline. The same pattern of promises made and promises broken. The same slow erosion of trust between the government and the governed. The meeting ends and the people file out, their faces ranging from resigned to angry to simply tired. You follow them out into the street and you watch them disperse, going back to their homes and their workplaces and their daily struggles. You think about the people who are trying to hold this city together, the officials and administrators and workers who are doing their best in impossible circumstances, who are managing the decline as best they can, who are trying to maintain some semblance of order and stability in a world that is becoming increasingly chaotic and unpredictable. You feel a grudging respect for them, even as you recognize the futility of their efforts, even as you know that the forces that are tearing the empire apart are far greater than anything any individual or group of individuals can control. You walk through the afternoon, and the sun is warm on your face, and the city is alive with the sounds and smells of daily life. You pass a school, and you can hear children reciting their lessons, the rhythmic chant of young voices repeating words and phrases that have been taught to children in this city for centuries. You pass a large public building, and you can see people coming and going, not to attend formal gatherings, you realize, but to use the building as a community center, a meeting place, a shelter from the sun. You pass a theater, and you can see actors rehearsing on the stage, their voices carrying across the empty seats as they practice their lines. You pass a public bath, and you can hear the sounds of water and conversation from inside, the echo of people enjoying one of the few remaining public amenities that still functions as it was intended. You think about the cultural shifts that are happening in this city, the way the old ways are being replaced by new ones, the way the traditions that defined Roman life for centuries are slowly fading and being replaced by something different, something hybrid, something that draws from many different sources. You think about the language, how Latin is being mixed with other languages, how new words are entering the vocabulary, how the grammar is simplifying, how the written form is diverging from the spoken form. You think about the art, how the classical styles are giving way to something more abstract and symbolic, how the emphasis is shifting from realism to expression, from the individual to the collective. You think about the architecture, how the grand classical forms are being replaced by simpler, more functional designs, how the emphasis is shifting from beauty to utility, from monument to shelter. You stop at a corner and watch the street life, the way people move through the city, the way they interact with each other, the way they carry themselves with a mixture of pride and resignation that suggests they know the world is changing, but are not sure what to do about it. You see a group of young men walking together, their clothes a mix of Roman and Germanic styles, their speech a blend of Latin and something else, their attitude suggesting that they belong to neither world and both worlds at the same time. You see an old woman selling vegetables from a basket, her face lined with age, her hands rough from years of work, her prices fair but firm, her demeanor suggesting that she has survived everything the world has thrown at her and will continue to survive whatever comes next. You see a child running through the street, chasing a ball, laughing, completely unaware of the historical forces that are shaping his world, completely absorbed in the simple joy of play. The afternoon stretches on, and the light begins to change, the harsh brightness of midday softening into the warmer tones of late afternoon. The shadows grow longer, and the temperature drops slightly, and you can feel the transition from day to evening beginning to take hold. You find a bench in a small square and sit down, and you watch the city settle into its evening routine. The shops are closing, the workers are heading home, the children are being called in from the streets, the lamps are being lit. The city is preparing for the night, for the quiet hours when the pace slows and the noise fades, and the world becomes smaller and more intimate. You think about the empire, about its rise and its fall, about the forces that made it great and the forces that are tearing it apart. You think about the political corruption, the way power has become concentrated in the hands of a few, the way the institutions that were designed to serve the public good have been hijacked by private interests, the way the gap between the ruling class and the common people has grown so wide that they might as well be living in different worlds. You think about the military, the way the army has been stretched thin, the way the soldiers are underpaid and undermanned, the way the borders are being breached by groups that the empire can no longer repel. You think about the economy, the way the currency has been debased, the way trade has collapsed, the way the tax system has become so burdensome that it is destroying the very communities it is supposed to support. You think about the administrative division, the way the empire has been split into eastern and western halves, the way the eastern half is thriving while the western half struggles, the way the capital has been moved from Rome to cities that are more strategically located but less symbolically significant. You think about all of these things, and you realize that none of them happened overnight, that the fall of the empire was not a single event, but a long, slow process, a series of small failures and small compromises and small decisions that added up over time to create a situation in which the collapse became inevitable. You think about the people who lived through this process, the generations who watched the world change around them, who tried to adapt and survive and maintain some semblance of normalcy in the face of forces that were far beyond their control. You think about their daily lives, their struggles and their triumphs, their small moments of joy and their larger moments of despair, and you feel a deep connection to them, a sense of shared humanity that transcends the centuries and the cultural differences and the historical distance. The sun is setting now, and the sky is painted in shades of orange and pink and purple. A display of natural beauty that has nothing to do with the rise and fall of empires, and everything to do with the rotation of the earth and the scattering of light in the atmosphere. You watch the colors change, and you feel a sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the fact that the world is what it is, and that you are here to witness it, however briefly, and that there is beauty in that witness, meaning in that presence, significance in that awareness. The sky deepens, the colors fading into gray and then into darkness, and the stars begin to appear, one by one, small points of light in a vast and indifferent universe. You breathe in the cool evening air, and you feel the day's warmth leaving the stone beneath you, and you hear the sounds of the city settling into its nighttime rhythm, and you let yourself drift into the space between thought and feeling, between awareness and dream, between the world as it is and the world as it might be. You are walking again, though you are not entirely sure when you started. The night is deep, and the streets are mostly empty, and the lamps are dimming low, their light flickering in the breeze. You are moving slowly, without urgency, your steps measured and deliberate, your mind half focused on the world around you, and half lost in the landscape of your own thoughts. You pass through neighborhoods you have already walked through, but they feel different now, quieter, more intimate, as if the darkness has stripped away the distractions of the day and left only the essential character of the place. You can hear the sounds of the night more clearly, the insects calling, the wind rustling through the trees, the distant bark of a dog, the soft murmur of voices from behind closed doors. You find yourself near the city walls again, and you can see the guards on the walkway above, their figures dark against the starlit sky. They are moving slowly, their footsteps muffled by the earth on the wall, their weapons catching the faint light of the stars. You think about the men who guard these walls, the responsibility they carry, the vigilance they must maintain, even when nothing is happening, even when the threat is distant and abstract, even when the empire they are defending is no longer the empire their grandparents knew. You think about the walls themselves, the enormous effort it took to build them, the thousands of workers who quarried the stone and mixed the mortar and fitted the blocks together with such precision that they have stood for centuries. You think about the purpose of the walls, to keep the enemies out, to define the boundary between the civilized world and the wilderness beyond, to create a sense of security and order within the space they enclose. You wonder how effective they really are, whether the walls protect the city or simply create an illusion of protection, whether the real threats come from outside or from within, whether the walls are still relevant in a world where the empire's borders are thousands of miles away and the enemies are inside the gates. You walk along the wall for a while, and you can feel the ground sloping upward as you follow the contour of the fortifications. The wall curves, and you find yourself looking out over the countryside, and you can see the dark shapes of farms and villages scattered across the landscape. There are no lights, or very few, just the occasional flicker of a fire or a lamp in a farmhouse window. The countryside is quiet, and you can hear the sounds of the night, the insects calling, the wind moving through the trees, the distant call of an owl. You think about the relationship between the city and the countryside. The way the city depends on the countryside for food and raw materials. The way the countryside depends on the city for manufactured goods and markets and protection. You think about how this relationship has been strained by the decline of the empire, how the city can no longer protect the countryside from raiders, how the countryside can no longer supply the city with the food it needs, how the mutual dependence that once bound them together is now becoming a mutual liability. You turn away from the wall and walk back toward the center of the city, and you find yourself on a street that you have not walked before. The buildings here are a mix of styles and ages, some old and weathered, some newer, but already showing signs of wear. The street is narrow and winding, and the buildings lean toward each other as if sharing secrets. You can see small courtyards between the buildings, glimpses of green space and open sky, little pockets of privacy in a city that is mostly public and exposed. You can hear the sounds of life behind the walls, the murmur of conversation, the clinking of dishes, the occasional burst of laughter, the soft sound of a lullaby being sung to a child. You walk quietly through this street, respectful of the privacy of the people who live here, aware that you are a stranger in a neighborhood where strangers are not common. You come to a small square, and in the center of the square, there is a well, the kind of well that has been providing water to the neighborhood for generations. The stone rim is worn smooth by the hands of countless people who have drawn water from this well, and the rope is frayed and patched, and the bucket is wooden and heavy and scarred from years of use. You approach the well, and you look down into the darkness, and you can see the water far below, a faint gleam in the dim light. You think about the water, about the aqueducts that bring it to the city, the underground channels and the bridges, and the fountains and the pipes, the vast system of engineering that has been providing fresh water to this city for centuries. You think about the maintenance of this system, the workers who keep it running, the resources it requires, the vulnerability of its infrastructure, the way a single point of failure can cut off the water supply to entire neighborhoods. You think about how much the people of this city take the water for granted, how they expect it to flow from the fountains and the wells and the pipes without thinking about the effort and expense and engineering that makes it possible, how they will only realize its value when it stops flowing. You move away from the well and find yourself standing near a building that is clearly still occupied. There is light coming from the windows, and you can hear the sound of voices inside. A family gathered for the evening meal. You can smell food cooking, something with meat and vegetables and herbs, and your stomach makes another small, involuntary sound. You think about the family inside, about their lives, their routines, their relationships, their struggles, and their joys. You think about the father, coming home from work, tired and hungry, sitting down at the table and sharing a meal with his family. You think about the mother, preparing the food, managing the household, keeping track of the supplies, making do with less and less each year. You think about the children, growing up in a world that is different from the world their parents grew up in. A world that is smaller and poorer and more uncertain. A world in which the grand narratives of empire and glory and destiny have been replaced by the daily struggle for survival. You think about all of this, and you feel a deep sense of tenderness for these people. These ordinary people who are living through extraordinary times, who are doing their best to maintain their dignity and their humanity in a world that is becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. You walk on, and the night deepens, and the city grows quieter. You pass through streets that are lined with sleeping buildings, their windows dark, their doors closed, their inhabitants lost in the restorative darkness of sleep. You can hear the sounds of sleeping, the soft breathing of people in their beds, the occasional snore, the rustle of sheets, the murmur of a dream. You walk through these sounds, through this sleeping city, and you feel a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction in being awake while the world rests, in bearing witness to the stillness and the silence and the beauty of a city at peace with itself. However, briefly, you find yourself near the river again, and you can hear the water flowing, a soft, continuous sound that has been the backdrop to this city's existence for millennia. You walk along the riverbank, and the ground is cool and damp beneath your feet, and the air is thick with the scent of water and vegetation, and the faint sweetness of night-blooming flowers. You can see the reflection of the stars in the water, a mirror image of the sky above, shimmering and wavering with the movement of the current. You think about the river, about its role in the life of the city, about the ships that used to sail up from the sea bringing goods from every corner of the empire, about the trade that flowed along its banks, about the prosperity it brought and the decline it has witnessed. You think about the harbor, the great port that once teemed with activity, the warehouses filled with grain and oil and wine and silk and spices, the merchants from every corner of the known world gathering to buy and sell and negotiate and scheme. You think about what the harbor looks like now, whether the ships still come, whether the warehouses are still full, whether the merchants still gather, or whether the harbor has become a shadow of its former self, a place of diminished activity and faded memories. You decide to walk to the harbor because you want to see it for yourself, because you want to witness the reality of the empire's decline with your own eyes, because you are drawn to the places where the great forces of history leave their most visible marks. You follow the river, and the streets become less populated, the buildings more sparse, the atmosphere more industrial. You can smell the harbor before you see it, the distinctive scent of salt and seaweed and tar and fish and whatever else accumulates in a working port. You can hear the sounds of the harbor, the creaking of ships, the slap of water against hulls, the calls of dock workers, the clinking of chains and ropes. You can see the lights of the harbor, small pools of amber and white scattered along the waterfront, illuminating the ships and the docks and the warehouses in a patchwork of light and shadow. You arrive at the edge of the harbor and you look out over the water, and you can see the ships moored along the docks, some large and some small, some in good condition and others clearly past their prime. You can see the warehouses lining the waterfront, some with their doors open and light spilling out, others dark and closed and apparently abandoned. You can see the cranes and the hoists and the other equipment of the port, some of it well maintained and functioning, some of it rusted and broken and unused. You walk along the dock, and you can see the details of the harbor's condition, the way the wood of the docks is weathered and cracked, the way the ropes and chains are frayed and patched, the way the ships are smaller and fewer than they once were. You think about the trade routes that have been disrupted, the way the Western Mediterranean has become increasingly dangerous, the way the Vandals have established themselves in North Africa and are controlling the grain supply, the way the shipping lanes that once connected Rome to its provinces are now blocked or restricted or too risky to use. You find a bench on the dock, or what passes for a bench, a wooden pallet propped up against a post, and you sit down and look out over the water. The harbor is quiet now, the daytime activity replaced by the nighttime stillness. A few ships are gently rocking in the current, their masts swaying slightly in the breeze. The water is dark and still, reflecting the stars and the lights of the harbor in a shimmering mosaic of light and shadow. You breathe in the salty air, and you can taste the sea on your lips, and you feel the weight of the moment, the significance of standing here in this harbor at this time in history, witnessing the decline of a great maritime power, the shrinking of a trade network that once connected the known world, the slow retreat of an empire from the sea that was once its domain. You think about the Vandals, the people who have taken control of North Africa, and with it, the grain supply that has fed Rome for centuries. You think about their ships, their raids, their presence in the Western Mediterranean, the way they have disrupted the flow of goods and people and information, the way they have turned what was once a Roman lake into a contested space. You think about the response of the empire, the attempts to mount naval expeditions against the Vandals, the failures and the setbacks, the way the Western Empire has been unable to project power across the sea, the way the Eastern Empire has been reluctant to commit resources to the West, the way the two halves of the empire have grown increasingly separate and self-interested. You think about the consequences of all of this, the food shortages, the economic disruption, the political instability, the way the loss of North Africa has been a blow, from which the Western Empire has never fully recovered. You stand up and walk along the dock, and you pass a ship that is is clearly being prepared for departure. Workers are loading cargo, barrels and crates and sacks, and you can hear the rhythm of their labor, the grunts of effort, the calls of coordination, the sound of cargo being hoisted and placed and secured. You watch them for a while, and you can see the determination in their movements, the way they are doing their job with focus and efficiency, the way they are contributing to the life of the city, even as the larger structures that support that life are crumbling around them. You think about the sailors, the men who will take this ship out into the Mediterranean, who will navigate the dangerous waters, who will face the risks of piracy and storm, and whatever else the sea has to offer. You think about their lives, the way they spend their days on the water, away from their families, exposed to the elements, dependent on the weather and the wind and the currents. You think about the courage it takes to be a sailor in this time, to set out on a journey that may or may not end in safe return, to face the unknown with a mixture of resolve and resignation and professional skill. You continue walking, and the night is deep now, the kind of deep that only comes in the hours before dawn, when the world is at its darkest and most quiet. The harbor is mostly still, the ships resting at their moorings, the warehouses dark and closed, the dockworkers gone to their homes and their beds. You walk through this stillness, and you feel a sense of calm, a peacefulness that comes from being alone in a place that is usually crowded and noisy, from witnessing the harbor in its most vulnerable and intimate state, from seeing the infrastructure of commerce and trade stripped of its activity and revealed in its essential form. You breathe in the cool night air, and you can smell the salt and the seaweed and the faint sweetness of the flowers that grow along the waterfront. And you feel the weight of the moment, the significance of standing here in this harbor at this time, and you let yourself absorb it all, the sights and the sounds and the smells and the feelings, all of it flowing through you like the water that laps against the dock, gentle and persistent and endless. You are walking again, though you are not entirely sure of the direction or the purpose. The night is beginning to lighten, just slightly, a faint gray glow on the eastern horizon that suggests dawn is still an hour or two away. The streets are quiet, and the buildings are dark, and the only sounds are the distant call of a bird and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. You walk through this half-awake city, and you feel a sense of anticipation, the feeling that the day is about to begin, that the activity and the noise and the movement of the city will soon resume, that the quiet hours of the night will give way to the busy hours of the day. But for now, in this liminal space between night and day, the city is still, and you are still, and the world is suspended in a moment of perfect balance. You find yourself near a large open space, and you can see the outline of a building in the darkness, a massive structure with columns and a dome, clearly one of the great public buildings of the city. You approach it, and you can see the details more clearly as the light increases, the grandeur of the architecture, the scale of the construction, the evidence of the wealth and power that went into building something so large and so beautiful. But you can also see the signs of decline, the cracks in the walls, the missing stones, the patches of discoloration, the vegetation growing in the crevices. You walk around the building, and you can see the extent of the deterioration, the way the grand entrance is partially blocked by debris, the way the interior is visible through broken windows, the way the once magnificent facade is marred by neglect and time. You think about the people who built this building, the architects and the engineers, and the workers who dedicated years of their lives to creating something of this scale and beauty. You think about the resources that went into it, the marble quarried from distant mountains, the metals mined from remote deposits, the timber cut from forests far away, the labor of thousands of people organized and coordinated and directed toward a single purpose. You think about the purpose itself, the reason this building was constructed, the function it was intended to serve, the role it played in the life of the city and the empire. And you think about what it is now, an empty shell, a monument to a past that is slipping away, a reminder of what the empire once was and what it is becoming. You step inside the building because the entrance is open and the interior is cool and dim, lit by the faint gray light filtering through the broken windows and the open sections of the roof. You can see the vastness of the space, the height of the ceiling, the expanse of the floor. You can see the traces of the building's former life, the hooks on the walls, the marks on the floor, the stains and the scuff marks, and the accumulated evidence of centuries of use. You walk to the center of the space, and you look up at the dome, and you can see the cracks running through it, the places where the plaster has fallen away, the exposed structure beneath. You think about the engineering that went into building this dome, the mathematical precision, the structural understanding, the daring of creating a space of this size without the benefit of modern technology. You think about the beauty of it, even in its decay, the way the light filters through the cracks and creates patterns on the floor, the way the shadows shift and change as the sun moves across the sky, the way the building continues to inspire awe even as it crumbles. You stand in the center of this vast space, and you feel small, not in a humiliating way, but in a liberating way, a way that reminds you that you are part of something larger than yourself, something that existed before you and will exist after you, something that does not depend on your presence or your approval or your understanding. You breathe in the cool air of the building, and you can smell the dust and the age and the faint sweetness of the stone, and you let the stillness and the silence wrap around you, and you feel a sense of peace that is rare and precious, a peace that comes from accepting the impermanence of all things, from recognizing that everything built by human hands eventually returns to the earth, from finding beauty in the decay and meaning in the transience and comfort in the inevitability of change. The light is increasing now. The gray glow on the horizon deepening into the soft colors of dawn. You can see the sky through the open sections of the roof, and you can watch the colors change, the gray giving way to pink and orange and gold, the darkness retreating before the advancing light. You think about the cycle of day and night, the way the world turns and the sun rises and sets and rises again, the way the seasons change and the years pass and the centuries accumulate, the way the empire rises and falls and rises again in a different form, a different shape, a different expression of the same human desire for order and meaning and connection. You think about the people who have stood in this building before you, the generations who have walked these floors and looked up at this dome and felt the same sense of awe and smallness and peace that you are feeling now. And you feel a connection to them, a thread of shared experience that stretches across the centuries and connects you to the long chain of human existence. You leave the building, and the morning light is warm on your face, and the city is beginning to wake. You can hear the sounds of the day starting, the doors opening, the carts rolling, the voices calling, the general murmur of a city coming to life. You walk through these sounds, through this awakening city, and you feel a sense of contentment, a quiet satisfaction in having witnessed the night and the dawn and the beauty and the decay and the impermanence and the persistence of it all. You are walking through a city that is dying, yes, but it is also living, still breathing, still functioning, still home to the people who are trying to make sense of their lives in a world that is changing faster than they can understand. And you are part of that, a witness, a participant, a traveler passing through time and space and carrying the story with you wherever you go. You find a quiet spot, a small garden behind a row of houses, and you sit down on a stone bench and you watch the morning unfold. The sun is rising now, and the light is golden and warm, and it touches everything it reaches, the buildings and the streets and the trees and the people, turning the ordinary into something beautiful, something transcendent, something that makes you feel grateful for the simple fact of being alive and aware and present in this moment. You breathe in the morning air, and you can smell the dew on the grass and the smoke from the cooking fires and the faint sweetness of the flowers. And you close your eyes and let the sensations wash over you, the warmth of the sun on your face, the coolness of the stone beneath you, the sounds of the city waking around you, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. The city is alive, and you are alive, and the world is turning, and the empire is falling. And none of these things are in conflict with each other, because they are all part of the same story, the same unfolding narrative of human existence, the same endless cycle of creation and renewal and renewal. You open your eyes and you look at the world around you, and you see it clearly, without judgment or fear or resistance, and you accept it as it is, beautiful and imperfect and transient and enduring all at once. And you feel a deep sense of peace, a quiet contentment that settles deep within you and fills your chest and slows your breathing and calms your mind. The The morning stretches on, and the city grows more active, the streets filling with people, the markets opening, the workshops starting up, the daily rhythms of life resuming their familiar patterns. But you remain in your quiet spot, on your stone bench, in your small garden, watching and listening and breathing, letting the world move around you while you stay still, anchored in the present moment, held by the gentle rhythm of your own breath and the steady pulse of your own heart and the soft warmth of the morning sun on your face. You think about the end of the empire, not as a catastrophe, but as a transition, a change from one form of organization to another, a shift from the centralized authority of Rome to the more localized and fragmented structures that will emerge in its wake. You think about the people who will live through this transition, the generations who will inherit a world that is different from the one their grandparents knew, who will adapt and survive and build something new from the ruins of the old. You think about the continuity of human experience, the way life goes on regardless of the rise and fall of empires, the way people continue to love and work and eat and sleep and dream, the way the basic rhythms of existence persist even when the political and economic structures that surround them are transformed beyond recognition. You feel the weight of this knowledge, not as a burden, but as a comfort, a reassurance that the world will continue to turn, that life will continue to find a way, that the story of humanity will continue to unfold in ways that are both predictable and surprising, both familiar and strange. You breathe in and you breathe out, and you let the morning light warm your face, and you let the sounds of the city fill your ears, and you let the peace of this moment settle into your body and your mind, and you feel yourself drifting slowly and gently into the space between waking and sleeping, where the boundaries between past and present and future blur and dissolve, and nothing matters except the rhythm of your breath and the warmth of the sun and the gentle sound of the city breathing around you. The light is softer now, the morning sun giving way to the warmer tones of midday. You are still sitting on your bench, still breathing, still watching, but your thoughts are becoming less focused, your attention less sharp, your body more relaxed. You are sinking into the moment, into the stillness, into the quiet, and you feel the pull of sleep, gentle and insistent, a soft invitation to let go and rest and surrender to the rhythms of your own body and the rhythms of the world around you. You resist for a moment because you want to stay awake, because you want to see more of this city and this world and this story. But the resistance is feeble because the peace is so deep and the tiredness is so real and the invitation is so gentle that you cannot help but yield. Your eyes are closing now, and the light is dimming, and the sounds of the city are becoming softer and more distant, and you feel yourself floating, drifting, sinking into the darkness that is warm and safe and full of the promise of rest. You think about the empire one last time, not as a political entity or a historical phenomenon, as a story that has been told and retold for centuries, a story that will continue to be told long after the last stone of the last building has crumbled into dust. A story that is part of the larger story of humanity, the story of people trying to make sense of their lives in a world that is beautiful and terrible and fragile and enduring all at once. You think about this story and you feel a sense of connection to all the people who have told it and heard it and lived it. A thread of shared experience that stretches across the centuries and connects you to the long chain of human existence. Your breathing is slower now, deeper, more rhythmic, and you feel the weight of your body settling into the stone beneath you, the warmth of the sun on your face, the coolness of the shade on your back, the gentle breeze on your skin, the soft sounds of the city around you. All of it blending together into a symphony of sensation that is both complex and simple, both vivid and fading, both present and slipping away. You are drifting, 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 and the world is slipping away, and the city is slipping away, and the empire is slipping away, and you are slipping away with it, into the darkness, into the quiet, into the peace that has been waiting for you since the moment you began this walk. The darkness is warm, and it wraps around you like a blanket, heavy and comforting and familiar. You can feel yourself sinking deeper into it, deeper into the rest, deeper into the stillness, and you feel no fear, no anxiety, no resistance, only the gentle acceptance of a body and a mind that have done enough for today and are ready to let go. The sounds of the city are fading now, replaced by the sound of your own breathing, slow and steady and deep. A rhythm that is older than the city and older than the empire and older than the story you have been telling yourself all this time. A rhythm that belongs to the earth itself, to the turning of the world, to the pulse of life that continues regardless of what happens on the surface of things. You are almost asleep now, almost lost in the darkness, almost dissolved into the quiet, and you feel the last traces of awareness slipping away, the last thoughts dissolving into the gentle haze of approaching sleep, the last sensations fading into the soft warmth of rest. You think about the city one final time, about the people who live there, the people who built it, the people who will inherit it, and you feel a sense of tenderness for all of them, a deep and quiet love for the human project, for the attempt to create order and beauty and meaning in a world that is chaotic and indifferent and vast. You think about this love, and you let it fill you, and you let it carry you into the darkness, into the rest, into the dream that is waiting for you on the other side of this moment. The world is quiet now, and you are quiet, and the city is quiet, and the empire is quiet, and all that remains is the gentle rhythm of your breath and the warm darkness that holds you, and the soft promise of rest that has been waiting for you since the beginning of this walk. You let go and you fall and you sleep, and the dream takes you, and the story continues, and the world keeps turning, and the sun keeps rising, and the city keeps breathing, and you keep breathing with it, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one gentle step at a time into the darkness and the quiet and the peace that awaits you on the other side of waking. The stones are warm beneath you. The air is soft against your skin. The sounds are distant and gentle. The light is fading and returning and fading again in a rhythm that matches your breathing, slow and steady and deep. You are drifting through the spaces between moments, between thoughts, between sensations, floating in the gentle current of your own rest, carried by the rhythm of your heart and the pulse of the earth and the slow turning of the world. The city is a memory now, a story you have told yourself, a place you have visited in the landscape of your mind, and the empire is a shadow, a whisper, a trace of something that once was and is no more, and yet, somehow, continues to exist in the stories that people tell each other in the dark. You are sinking deeper now, deeper into the warmth, deeper into the quiet, deeper into the peace, and you feel the last traces of the waking world dissolving around you, the last images fading, the last sounds softening, the last sensations melting into the gentle haze of sleep. You are almost there, almost lost, almost dissolved into the darkness that holds you, and you feel no fear, only the gentle acceptance of a body and a mind that are ready to rest, ready to let go, ready to surrender to the rhythms of sleep and the promise of dreams. The darkness is complete now, and you are resting within it, held by the warmth and the quiet and the peace, breathing slowly and deeply and rhythmically, your body relaxed, your mind at rest, your spirit at peace. The world continues to turn, the city continues to breathe, the empire continues to fall. But none of that matters now, because you are here, in this moment, in this darkness, in this rest, and everything else is distant and soft and irrelevant. You breathe and you rest and you sleep, and the dream takes you, and the story ends, and the night wraps around you like a blanket, warm and heavy and comforting. And you drift, and you drift, and you drift into the quiet, into the darkness, into the gentle stillness of the space between waking and dreaming, where nothing matters except the rhythm of your breath and the warmth of the darkness and the soft promise of rest. The last light fades, the last sound softens, the last sensation dissolves, and you are alone in the darkness, held and safe and at peace, breathing slowly and deeply and rhythmically, your body resting, your mind quiet, your spirit calm. The city is sleeping now, and the empire is sleeping, and the world is sleeping, and you are sleeping with them, all of you resting together in the gentle darkness of the night, held by the warmth and the quiet and the peace that has been waiting for you since the beginning of this long and beautiful walk. And as the night deepens and the darkness thickens and the quiet grows, you feel yourself slipping further and further into the rest, further and further into the dream, further and further into the gentle stillness that holds you, and you let go completely. You let go of everything. You let go of the city and the empire and the story and the walk and the world. and you fall into the sleep that has been waiting for you, deep and restful and dreamless, held by the warmth and the quiet and the peace of the endless night. The stones cool beneath you, the air softens around you, the sounds fade away from you, the light disappears from your sight, and you are alone in the darkness, breathing slowly and deeply and rhythmically, resting, resting, resting in the warm and gentle quiet of the night, held by the peace that comes at the end of a long walk through a city that was once the center of the world and is now just a place in your mind, a story you have told yourself, a memory you will carry with you into the darkness and the dream and the gentle stillness of sleep. You breathe and you rest and you sleep, and the night holds you, and the darkness wraps around you, and the peace settles deep within you, and you are safe, and you are warm, and you are at rest, and the world continues to turn without you, and the city continues to breathe without you, and the empire continues to fall without you, and you are okay with that, because you have done enough for today, because you have seen enough, because you have walked enough, and now it is time to rest, to let go, to surrender to the gentle rhythms of sleep, and the promise of dreams, and the soft warmth of the night. You are drifting now, drifting deeper and deeper into the rest, into the quiet, into the peace, and the world is fading, and the story is fading, and the city is fading, and you are fading with it, into the darkness, into the dream, into the gentle stillness of the space between waking and sleeping, where nothing matters except the rhythm of your breath, and the warmth of the darkness, and the soft promise of rest. Sweet dreams.